So this has been the Gathering Impact Edition, and we thought we would close off the day by giving the last word to journalists, and to journalists who are particularly adept at making impact with their work. And I'm delighted to be closing off the day sitting here with three of my journalistic heroes. From the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, we have Micah, Reddy, and from right here at Daily Maverick, we have Estelle, Ellis, and Pieter-Louis Myburgh. Please welcome them. Welcome, chaps. Pieter-Louis, been up to anything interesting lately?
I haven't slept much of late, so I can't remember. You answer that question.
Well, I think we may have some footage.
Today, we'll unpack the most extraordinary series of developments regarding the Boho Malaka, CEO of the Independent Development Trust, or IDT.
Why do you hate me so much?
I didn't hate Lucky Montana, I didn't hate Ismagashule, I didn't hate Zweli Mkhize.
Malaka and the IDT spokesperson met me at a restaurant in the Cape Winelands, where they presented me with a substantial wad of cash.
I never bribed anyone. I never went there with the intention to bribe anyone.
So what did you bring today?
A 60,000 Rand cash offer, promises of lucrative tenders.
Then you can also look at the portfolio. Maybe you can have one or two.
That I'm 55 years old.
Okay, sure.
I'm not young. So I just want to close this chapter.
What was Malaka actually hoping to bury?
So nobody in this room got a payment in November?
Nobody.
Those monies were used for the house.
Yeah.
Nobody got a payment in December? Nobody got a payment in January or February or March? They must get their salary somehow. Yeah. Those workers, those are very poor people, eh? Yeah.
Which ones?
My secretly recorded discussions with Malaka leaves little doubt that she was hoping to quash my investigation into a property currently being built inside Gauteng's upmarket Waterfall country estate. Plus, Malaka's ties to Colin Mashawana, a so-called philanthropist and major beneficiary of government contracts.
There are allegations that Colin Mashawana is assisting and aiding in building a house for you in Johannesburg. These are serious allegations, given the fact that he's been contracted to a project.
That the Colin Mashawana Foundation landed a 60 million Rand contract from the IDT in the very same time frame in which Mashawana got involved in Malaka's Waterfall property.
It's not true that he's contributing anything towards the building of the house for the family trust.
One of Mashawana's many entities transferred roughly 100,000 Rand to a service provider working on Malaka's house. In January 2025, Mashawana coordinated the delivery of ready-mix concrete to Malaka's stand. He also appointed two Putswa Mayeba construction and projects, the main contractor listed on the construction sign. What's more, he regularly communicated with the architects, engineer and other service providers involved in building Malaka's mansion. He made a second payment towards the property in April 2025, and while progress with House Malaka was steaming ahead, the Colin Mashawana Foundation's EPWP workers were still battling with a non-profit to get their salaries. Is it fair for us to at least suspect that some of these funds were being diverted to the IDT CEO's Waterfall property?
All right. So, Pieter-Louis, let's start with the basics. Are you allowed to talk about this today? And tell them why I'm asking that.
Yeah, Rebecca. So as of yesterday, we have a court ruling in our favor. So Mr. Colin Mashawana, the business person in question, launched an urgent application at the South African High Court to try and interdict us from discussing this very important issue. It was effectively a gag order, and then yesterday, thankfully, sanity prevailed in the South Gauteng High Court, and thanks to the incredible legal work of he said I should use this term, my rotten attorney, and that's Hunter Thompson, Mr. Charles du Plessis and Willem de Klerk attorneys and our instructing advocates, the name will come back to me. We got a ruling in our favor, and we're actually allowed to exercise our democratic right to discuss this issue. So, yeah.
We were all secretly a bit disappointed because if Pieter-Louis had been unable to speak about his investigation, we suggested he could rap.
Well, I thought we could maybe speak of he who resides in Gauteng and runs a charitable foundation.
I mean, Pieter-Louis, this is the most extraordinary story, as I think we all appreciate. It's just so rare to catch evidence of wrongdoing in 4K like that. What for you are the aspects that make this significant?
Look, so yeah, I think everybody needs to understand that there's a pretty long run-up to this moment where the bribe is offered. So just quickly, the context is, I've been looking at IDT affairs since October last year when we exposed that 800 million rand oxygen supply tender to provincial hospitals across South Africa. So the IDT managed that for the Department of Health. And that fed into this Malaka issue because a source contacted me and said, have a look at Malaka's property holdings. And I think just this kind of does speak to, and I think it's an important point because I'll raise it again in a moment, it speaks to the enterprising nature of investigative journalism. We get very raw little bits of intel, and then on the back of forensic news and experience and skill, we do actually put together what are pretty much sound forensic investigations. And I just want to mention this because earlier Mr. Edward Kieswetter did make this kind of point that there's this massive crevice between their evidence load and what the lowly media does. That is not the case. If they do go through the effort of reading our work, Amabungani's work, the work of other investigative journalists, they would realize that it's actually totally populated with these pieces of forensic evidence. Our filings at the South Gauteng High Court now was attached with 36 individual pieces of evidence that I had accumulated in the process of investigating Mr. Colin Mashawana and the IDT. And that kind of like led to the video moment because I was making progress on this house issue when the spokesperson contacted me in early June and said, hey, let's go meet and discuss private matters, matters of a mutual sort of nature. And that immediately kind of set off alarm bells. I knew this is no longer an ordinary interaction between a journalist and a spokesperson. There's something dastardly, something weird happening. And at that very moment, I briefed my editors, and from early June, we approached it as a potential investigative sting project and put it together in the ensuing 2 months, culminating in that event at Spier on the Sunday in August somewhere. Yeah.
One last question on this, and then we're going to move on. But I think a lot of people have expressed just total surprise at how reckless, I was going to say dumb, but that may be unfair, how reckless Malaka and the spokesperson were in this situation. To agree to meet up with one of the country's most renowned investigative journalists, the guy who took down Ace Makashula, who took down Zweli Mkhize, you're going to meet him up at Saturday at Spear and just hand him tens of thousands of rands. And not bat an eyelid when you whip out your iPhone 14 or whatever it is and take a picture of the bribe.
Absolutely. I think the concerning takeaway there is that the brazenness probably shows us that they are accustomed to offering people money to make things go their way. Just the insouciance and the calmness with which they offered that money shows me that this is kind of their conduct in the course of running their affairs. I think that's the worrying concern there. So they actually, with the photograph moment, and the reason why I did that, I must just point that out. So I knew that because obviously we'd consulted with the forensic team, we'd set up the surveillance, we'd planned for that moment for months, weeks in advance. I always suspected that what we were going to possibly get is pretty good video footage, but it would only show an item presented to me because I knew they were going to offer me money. And if we only had that, they could conceivably say, listen, we gave him documents. We wanted to give him a tip-off about something in the IDT, actually resources. And I knew that I had to also get the opportunity to document the cash in that little Dior bag, which I did. And there was much startlement on the side of Mr. Makhalane and the Boho Malaka. And he actually made they were worried about the development. And they asked me, do you have an app on your phone that can count money? So that was, well, I said, yeah, something like that, whatever you have to.
I love that detail so much because who would think you have an app on your phone to count money other than a criminal? Who would have that?
Yeah, exactly. So at that moment, the meeting was over, and I knew too because things couldn't really go wrong at that point. It was towards the end of the meeting. They'd presented the money. I took my chance, took the photo, and then got out of Dodge pretty soon after that.
Sticking them with a bill as well, just as a little extra. Yeah. Micah, you have recently taken on one of the country's most enticing political targets, and that is Mr. Julius Malema. So Micah here has just finished, right? You've just finished your book? Just finished a book with our dearly departed Polly van Wyk. She's not dead, she's just gone to work for Investec. On Julius Malema, it's called Malema, Money, Power and Patronage. Tell us a bit about that, and I'm also curious, because we are talking about impact. What is your sense of how the VBS scandal has damaged Malema politically?
I'll just firstly say this is very fitting.
It is, all right. I was wondering if you brought it as a prop.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, Malema has been a very slippery character. His corruption scandals, for those of you who can't remember, go all the way back to On Point when he was very young, and that was about, you know, that was more than a decade, and where are we now? So more than a decade and a half ago. And he has survived that. VBS, I do think, really dented him. I think it really damaged his credibility in the eyes of the public and his constituents, because it was just such an egregious case of corruption where ordinary people, poor people, working class people in Limpopo were essentially fleeced with the connivance of politicians. And so, although we haven't seen him hauled before court for that, we have seen what happened to the EFF's what happened to the EFF at the last elections. The book is kind of a deep dive into Malema, but I've never actually managed to interview him, sadly. And the book sort of tries to tell a bigger story about money, power, and patronage in South Africa through the story of Malema. But unfortunately, I mean, it's kind of frustrating, because the stuff that he really gets snagged on is, you know, what he says. So there was this recent hate speech ruling, for instance, and not really what he does. Or you know, the firearms case has captured headlines. But that's, I mean, it's relatively trivial when you weigh that up against the VBS looting, the corruption in the metros, the On Point case, which the NPA again said that they were going to revive, and we've seen no sign of that.
You know, Malema used to come to the gathering. Marianne Tam and I were reminiscing about it. And we'd give 50 free tickets to EFF members, and they'd come with their berries. And I must say, they brought a hell of a lot of gears to proceedings.
I'm hoping we won't get that much gears at the book launch.
No. Micah, can you give us a sort of like sneak preview, a tidbit of any of the juicy details that you've uncovered about Malema that are in your book?
Without giving too much away, we found a lot more that hasn't been in the public sphere on Point. You know, that was a lot worse than he was. I think much more deeply implicated than has been written about so far. There's a lot of new stuff about how the EFF were maneuvering in the metros, how they sort of positioned themselves as kingmakers and gatekeepers in the metros, and how they were able to sort of sway tenders and feed off tenders in the metros. I mean, that was a major cash spinner for Malema. And his close associate, who doesn't get much media attention, Marshal Dlamini, who's the Secretary General. So those are some of the new things, and lots of other little bits and bobs.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's been a long time in the works.
Yeah, we can't wait to read it. Estelle, you said something interesting to me backstage just now about the difference between dragon slayers, which is what you called journalists like Pieter-Louis and Micah, and yourself, who you sort of uncharitably, I think, referred to as the auntie in the kitchen. The truth is that Estelle here is a one-woman impact machine. I think she is probably the hardest working journalist in the country and the one who has the most impact in a bunch of different ways. What did you mean by that?
So, I mean, we all have that auntie, right? In my family, I'm that auntie that takes off the plucky, and then when it's Christmas time, they keep the flies out of the kitchen. And I think, and that's how I see myself, right? But I mean, on a deeper level, let me just explain. So Pieter-Louis and Micah very much work with people who do things that they do not want to be seen. And the people I talk about are the people who desperately needs to be seen. So we found, I think maybe by accident after I joined Daily Maverick, we found that when we amplify our community voices, the voices of people that are struggling, the voices of children that are dying of hunger, then we suddenly see impact. And that is what I do, but very much in the kitchen with the plucky every day. There's a lot of flies to kill.
And thank God for that. It is quite a plucky that you have. Is there a story that stands out for you as having had a particular impact?
So my hunger investigation started in 2021, and it was just after the initial aid relief for COVID was sort of ended. You know, we were all coming out of the pandemic, but the people who had lost their jobs, maybe casual workers, there was enormous hunger in the Eastern Cape. And we started writing about it, and there were denials, very vociferous denials from the Eastern Cape government. No, the children are just making it up. They like to get the extra food. People like to get food parcels. No, there isn't a problem. We're helping. It's no problem. But, you know, once you've seen like a 10-year-old that weighs 7 kilograms, then you know there's a problem. It's not, you can't deny it. And this went on for 3 years. You know, you get the phone calls, no, but you're lying, it's not true, you're telling people the wrong story. And eventually the Human Rights Commission took up my stories, and my stories formed the basis of a commission of inquiry into, it's a bit of a swear word, right? They just call it an inquiry into hunger in the Eastern Cape. And in November 2024, they found systemic hunger exists in the Eastern Cape, and they issued quite a far-reaching order. And that story is very close to my heart.
Jeez, that's amazing. That's incredible work. How easy do you find it when you're working on these kind of stories to extract information from the authorities?
So, you know, the good thing about being a journalist is you can basically just be a 4-year-old and you get paid for it, right? So you just have to ask the same question over and over. So you're just like, why? And I'll use my story on the chemotherapy. So I report a lot on children's issues, especially vulnerable children. And I mean, you all Daily Maverick readers, I hope, sign up for Baywatch, by the way. So I report on the Eastern Cape Health Department quite often, and we got wind that the chemotherapy was running out. There was no money to replace. They had very bad supply chain management issues. And then, of course, you know, then we got somewhere along the line, we got an MEC who then said, oh, you know, we intervened, so the problem's solved now. Because I think money fixes everything. But I've learned now, because I've been at them for about 15 years, so you had to go check, right? So I think if I counted correctly, it took 95 WhatsApp messages and more than 100 phone calls. Because I just phone, right? After a while, I don't even speak. I just phone and then I breathe. And they will tell you, they'll say the chemo's there, and I'll get in my car and I go, and I've got lots of insider people at the hospital, and they'll say, but we don't have any chemo for the kids, we're turning them away. And then I go back and I phone and I'm like, stop lying to me, there's no chemo. And then they'll tell you, oh, but you don't know the types of chemo that we use, so you're looking at the wrong thing. And I'm like, no, I know exactly what we need. And then I take pictures for them of the empty shelves. And I'm like, there's no chemo. But it does take, that's the amount of effort it does take, because, you know, we're 30 years into democracy, and the spin doctors have been spinning for 30 years, so they're very good at it now. But my inner 4-year-old is very strong, very strong.
I can't let you get away without telling the story. It's about your persistence and a lift.
Oh, the lifts. Okay, now let me just start saying I haven't taken a lift since I've done what I'm going to say now, because now I have a big fear of lifts. So we received reports from the one hospital that the lifts aren't working, supply chain management is problematic, so the lifts aren't being fixed. And this is a tricky hospital, it's an old building, so the theatres are on the first floor. So families need to carry their sick up and down the stairs for up to 7 floors. If you want to, the food ladies had to carry the food up and down. I mean, it's a huge mess. But of course, you know, the department denies. No, the lifts are, no, it's just a small glitch. No, it was a power failure. No, shame, this is you heard wrong. So then I thought, no, next 5 days, I'm going to take the lift every hour. So I go, the security looks at me a bit dodgy, but I've been banned from this hospital a few times, but they can't really ban me, so just carry on. And the lifts get stuck. I mean, I think I got stuck in a lift maybe 8 times, 9 times, but the last time I was coming down from the 6th floor, I think, and the lift stopped on the 4th floor, and a man pushes a dead body into the lift, right? So, I mean, it was sort of covered, but I still remember to this day, this guy still had a cigarette stuck in his fingers. Not the porter, the dead man. And sort of between the 3rd and the 2nd floor, the lift gets stuck. So, you know, so now you're in a position that your mother never taught you what to do, and you sort of, you say, you know, hi, I'm Estelle, and how's the children, and, you know, but eventually, I mean, this is not a fresh dead person, this, you know, the eyes go back, and we were there for about maybe 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours, and then I must say, when the lift went down and opened, the CEO of the hospital was there. Shame he's dead now, but he then, all he said to me when the lift opened, all he said to me was, "Oh, it's you." Yeah, and then we wrote the expose, and I must say, this was a big impacting for me, because those lifts are now working like a charm. They've never gotten stuck again.
Incredible. Pieter-Louis, what is your experience like in terms of extracting information from your subjects? Because if I opened up my email inbox one day and I had an email from Pieter-Louis Myburgh with media inquiry in the subject line, I would soil myself.
I do get that effect. So I was actually, after we published the latest stories, I was on the Anele show, which is on 947 up in Gauteng, and she actually told me that at one point somebody from Daily Maverick, it wasn't even me, emailed her about something unrelated about an event they wanted to do, and she was like, "Oh shit, what have I done?" You know, this Daily Maverick. So I mean, we do get that. It's just that, you know, at that point of contact with the subjects of our investigation, we've already obtained externally quite a substantial bulk of evidence that really, you know, they wouldn't be in a position to run away in any case. I mean, it's, at that point, it is up to them to provide sufficient rebuttals to what are very detailed queries that we put to them so that they can substantially grapple with all these issues that we unpack in these stories. And we prefer that. You know, we definitely want to, in the course of producing, you know, compelling, good journalism, we want the affected party to be given a very good opportunity to, you know, provide information that might possibly, you know, correct some of our material or some of our conclusions and actually, you know, provide more accurate reports. But frequently, I mean, as was the case with Mr. Mashawana, at that point, they decide to rather provide these very broad rebuttals. They don't, I mean, like, so we wanted to ask him about specifically those payments that were made to Malaka's property, because I know there were at least 2 payments that he transferred that was for the benefit of Malaka via that property building in the Waterfall Country Estate. And he just simply chose to ignore that. And instead of, you know, grappling and sort of hashing out those issues with me, he then at a later stage ran to the court and then tried to get this urgent interdict. So it is a process. I mean, it's an ongoing, it's a very fraught and frustrating process. And to kind of add to your previous question also to Estelle is that, and I think we have to address this country needs urgent redress in the legislation that enables journalists like myself to access what is records that we must have and that constitutionally we should be getting to enable us to inform the public of key developments pertaining to the public's funds. I mean, you guys are all paying tax. I am two SARS. This is our money. What is currently happening, we've got very good mechanisms on paper. One of them is PIA, it's the Promotion of Access to Information Act, that kind of ties to global precedent like FOIA in America, Freedom of Information Act, where journalists and the public can rightfully access public records pertaining to expenditure, etc. Very good on paper. In practice, it is absolutely insufficient at the moment. We're hitting stone walls where stone walls should not exist. We have very little recourse to address that without running to very expensive legal aid or legal assistance. And we are in a position marginally to do that, but I am concerned about smaller publications, community-based publications who also need to access those records, who do not have access to the same legal assistance that we do. So we have to get a discussion going about fixing PIA in South Africa. The mechanisms, the lag times are too long. There's 1 month for the first application, 1 month after the denial, etc. It needs to be radically fixed. The officials who run roughshod and ignore the queries, they need to be held more accountable. I think it needs to be a criminal offense to not assist the public and journalists in providing that information, because this is key democracy, this is democracy promoting mechanisms that should be functioning better in South Africa.
Couldn't agree more. Let's just get back to impact, Pieter-Louis. So you are, I mean, all too often, you know, as journalists, we write stories exposing fairly clear-cut wrongdoing and absolutely nothing happens, which is really quite kind of a soul-destroying effect. But you have had extraordinary impact, I think. What would you count as your most satisfying scalp?
Okay. It's kind of dangerous terrain to start highlighting it like that. So there's a couple of gentlemen who clearly, mostly gentlemen, who know that I have their scalps above my bedpost. And I worry about that sometimes. But I mean, that's the nature of the job. So, I mean, just the most prominent ones, it starts in 2015 with Lucky Montana and Prasa and the 2.5 billion rand Swifambo contract that luckily through our reporting, it culminated in the South Gauteng High Court overturning that contract, so 3.5 billion rand, sorry. So that no longer went ahead, and that kind of fed into my work on the Gupta leaks with a whole bunch of other amazing journalists, by the way. We're about 20 journalists, including yourself, unpacking the Gupta leaks, very much a high watermark moment for South African investigative journalism. But then I'm quite happy about my work on the 255 million rand Free State asbestos audit, which I unpack in the book Gangster State, because that then leads to the arrest and prosecution of Ace Magashule and 19 co-accused in that current case. And then in 2021, there was Digital Vibes, and that then Health Minister Willem Kize, who was effectively booted from President Ramaphosa's cabinet because of my reports, and then also the current work on Malaka. Yeah, so there's a couple of highlights. Yeah.
Pretty amazing stuff. Yeah.
And I don't want it's not for, you know, by any means for ego purposes that I ramble through this, but I really think I want to re-emphasize and re-emphasize and re-emphasize is that this work can have impact, and we need to be supported. We cannot be supported in these moments. We have these very prominent investigations, and we have the headlines, and I'm all over ENCA and SABC, and you know, all the focus is on me. We have unfortunately found in the past that, yes, during those moments, the public kind of rallies, and they come to us and they support us. There was the Gupta leaks, wonderful moment, and then in those in-between moments, when the tide kind of recedes, we are frequently kind of left on the beach on our own to again put up these bulwarks for the next tide on our own, and the support dries up. And I know I'm preaching to the choir to an extent here, a lot of you are insiders, but it's not the case broadly speaking. There's a lot of people who pay lip service to supporting us. I get the most wonderful compliments, and so do my colleagues, but it doesn't materialize and translate to the real financial support that we need. I think this country needs to collectively decide, and when I speak about the country, I speak about individuals who want to stay here and believe in the good of this country and what journalism can achieve. We have to make a new social pact today to decide to fund this kind of work, because we are floundering. Paulie van Wyk is no longer in this business because she made a decision to go work privately, and I do not blame her for it. It's a person who has a family who made a career decision because the business, the industry could not support her anymore. And we are going to lose more and more journalists if we do not very urgently, collectively decide that this work will be funded consistently by the public who profess to support it.
Well said. So either you guys become Maverick insiders, or we will have no choice but to start accepting the bribes. I think it's pretty much as simple as that. Micah,
but let's quickly put that into context. So that's 60,000 rand. We have now spent 250,000 rand on this story alone.
Yep.
That is the forensic work in filming that moment, and also the legal work after that. I'm not sure if Estelle and Gillian, if you figured out who's paying that bill, but I mean, we are...
The T-shirts.
We are the T-shirts. So we are R250,000 into just this one story.
Sure. All right. We might have to cut some of those drinks. Post-networking. Micah, how about you? What has your experience have been in terms of, writing a story and finding out that there is actually follow-through from, the NPA, from the Hawks, from whoever?
I mean, I don't have his kind of score of
strike rate. Yeah,
scalps. And it is, I mean, impact is a very annoying word in investigative journalism because it's so hard to quantify and to measure.
Yeah.
And donors want, in this digital age, they want analytics, they want to know, they want numbers, they want measurable impact. And with investigative journalism, I mean, sure, sometimes it's sensational, like what we saw on candid camera, but that was after a huge amount of work. And Pieter-Louis started publishing last year. Sometimes it is, sometimes the return on investment is very obvious, right? You may spend 200,000 rand on a story, but assets get seized, and the public recovers millions or billions. But that's pretty rare, and change is often very sort of incremental and very subtle, the change that investigative journalism brings about.
Yeah.
I think of the Gupta leaks as well. Before the Gupta leaks, there was plenty of work on the Guptas, but nothing really happened until there was this explosive leak. And it can be very frustrating because some of the stories I care least about go viral, have gone viral and gotten lots of readership. But readership doesn't necessarily equate to meaningful change. We steep ourselves in a story and we become unhealthily obsessive over this story for months and months and months, and it finally comes out and it's just crickets. So just to give you some examples, I mean, the one story I can think of that went viral at the time was a kind of quick hit piece. I almost didn't publish it because I thought, no, this is too silly and it's too easy. I just got a leak about an MEC who was giving her staff a real bollocking over like 10-day irregularities that they were sort of drawing attention to. And she was a complete bully, and so this recording was of her using very colorful language, bullying her staff. And I put it out there, was like a stub of an article, and it went viral. And what happened, I mean, ultimately she had to, issue a half-hearted apology, and then it was finished and klar. No real impact. Similarly, I just did a story on Equatorial Guinea. It was a collaboration with various media partners across the world, and we showed very dodgy financial transactions between an international construction firm and the son of the president, who also happens to be the deputy president, because it's practically a family business. And we published a bunch of stories that didn't get all that much traction. The story that I got a lot of positive feedback on was the kind of behind-the-scenes story about my trip there and a run-in with the cops. People loved that; they lapped it up, and I rarely get that much feedback from a story. But the actual investigation that we did, the forensic, dry, thousands of word long stories that few people would have read, and even fewer would have read top to bottom, that resulted in real change. There was an impact, there was an inquiry opened in Portugal, but that was never really made public. I think we wrote a sort of follow-up story on it. But that was real impact. I mean, I don't know where the inquiry will go, but it was something. That is something that's, I mean, I suppose that you could quantify to donors. And newsrooms have all these ways of trying to quantify impact of their stories. At ICIJ, we've sort of tried to quantify, how much in assets have been recovered from our various big collaborations. But it's very difficult work, and it's as if investigative journalism is not resource and time intensive enough. This is a real demand on resources to try and justify ourselves to donors, to say, well, this is the quantifiable impact that we are having. So yeah, long story short, it's hard to say. Probably the book will be the most impactful thing I've written.
I'm so intrigued by something you said there, where you said you got leaked this recording of the MEC and you almost didn't want to publish it because it was too easy.
Yeah.
Do you investigative geeks not consider it, I don't know, real work if you don't have to go through 5,000 spreadsheets and look at shell companies and stuff?
I mean, I don't mean that like hubristically. It's just it just kind of landed on my desk. And it was like, hey?
Does it feel like cheating?
It almost felt like cheat. I mean, it felt like a news story as opposed to an investigative story because I hadn't done the investigative legwork. So I just thought, well, maybe I should just pass this on to a newsroom. And then we thought, no, this counts as investigative.
This is not how normal journalists think, just to be very clear. If you want to leak me anything, I'll give you my number and the drinks. And that goes for you too, Micah. Pass it my way. Estelle, what does it take to get accountability in your experience?
I think, look, it's hard. Also because, you all know, I work in the Eastern Cape. I think there's alternative realities, right? We've got the way the Eastern Cape government sees the province, and then we have what the province really is. So somehow you need to find a way to merge the two. And it is difficult, so I like to get my hands dirty. If we get something leaked, look, you have to check. So I know Fran wants me to tell the horse story, but so I went to do some work in the Karoo, and I had to go see a farmer. But there were fairly extensive floods, and the roads in the Karoo are terrible. And I was waiting at the gate, and he says, okay, no, don't worry, we'll come fetch you at the gate. So I'm parked at the gate, I'm waiting. And I see you after a while. I'm waiting, but you have to be patient. After about 15 minutes, nothing. And I'm phoning again. It's like, no, we're coming. It's like, it's the Karoo. We'll be patient. Next minute, it's like a young boy coming, but he's on a horse, and he's got a horse with him. And let's just say, I wasn't dressed for horse riding. But what do? You get up on the horse and you get back up on the horse again. That's what it takes. That's what we do. And but it's difficult, right? I mean, but even if you get things that are leaked, sometimes you get a midnight phone call. Maybe you want to be there. Maybe you want to check what's been thrown away. Yeah. I don't often go through trash, but every now and again we do it. But you do have to go check for yourself, right? And I think that's the thing. It takes a lot of time, and as I said, but the most emotionally draining thing we do is to deal with the government spokespeople, because they will never admit wrongdoing, never.
Unless they hand you bags of money.
Yes, unless the bag and the Pieter-Louis and the phone and the what. I must say I'm a little bit, I only got once, I got almost bribed by a guy who, for some reason, very high level politician in the province thought I looked like the type of person who wanted to go to Euro Disney. And let's just add, he wasn't wrong. So I was having a meeting with someone in a dark restaurant, and this man walks past and he puts an envelope on the table. And I opened the envelope and I'm like, wow, this looks interesting. And it's like a whole proposal. But of course, I just folded it up and I gave it to the waiter and I said, will you go tell that gentleman he dropped something? And the arrogance of the man, he actually brought it back. And then I thought, now I've got two choices now, right? You can either send it back, or I thought, well, let me just tear it up. So I tore it in half, gave it back to I said, now at least he has to redo the document if he wants to. But yeah, I mean, you have to be vigilant all the time. In the Eastern Cape, we get our hands dirty. We sit down with the communities, with the mourning people, with people who are really desperately struggling. And that takes a lot of, I often come home and your heart is just torn out because you can't believe that people are struggling like that. But that's what we do. That's my commitment. I published my first newspaper when I was 8, and it's been a few decades, so this is what I know how to do.
I'm going to ask all of you this. We are running low on time, I see. And it's a question I think a lot of people wonder about, and that is the danger of the job. Estelle, have you ever considered yourself to be seriously at risk because of what you're reporting?
Funnily enough, not so much in the Eastern Cape. I used to, in my previous life, I used to report on, this is a while ago, but you'll all remember sort of early 2000s, we had a very bad, they called urban terrorism problem in Cape Town, and I was covering the court at the time. And for some reason, people took against those who reported what was said in court. And we did get a few threats. But, you know, it's, what can you do? I'd rather go down fighting than to run away.
Get out that plucky.
Get out my plucky.
Yeah, exactly right. What about you, Pieter-Louis?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, so it looks like they'd rather offer me money than do something else. But like in my research for Gangster State, it was a daunting episode in my life because that was taken on completely in isolation. That was a book project for Penguin Random House. So I decided to do that without the support of a newsroom, and that was me in the Free State on these consecutive research trips, increasingly expanding my contact network in the ANC structures in the province, many of whom had started to sort of, flip against Ace Magashule and had started to move to the Cyril Ramaphosa kind of faction. And many of them were my sources, but it soon became evident that a lot of them were playing a double game and were feeding progress of my investigation to the Magashule camp. And there were kind of intimations made that Ace is watching, he knows, he's dangerous. And I suppose, you have to make the call in terms of to what extent is that just a chilling effect, or is there any possible real intent behind those kind of threats? So, yeah, I mean, those were very lonely, desolate, tricky moments in 2019, well, late 2017, going into 2019, researching and then writing that book. And then a couple of occasions over the years, there have been like anonymous messages, intimations, it's always kind of like this code language, we're watching or we know what you're up to. So, I mean, it sort of does loom. It does loom. I think we thankfully are in a dispensation where journalists seem to be untouchable at the moment. I think they are wary of the fallout that would bring about. I mean, it's one hell of a potential liability to take out a journalist when they are researching or investigating yourself, because naturally that will very quickly point back to you. But I mean, as we've seen, unfortunately, and as Jeff Wicks's work has shown, it's the whistleblowers and the sources who frequently come under fire before us. They're a couple of positions ahead of us on the parapet. They're definitely on the front lines, a couple of trenches ahead of us. So there is also, just once again, much work needed to protect whistleblowers and sources in South Africa. And there's ongoing work with the Whistleblowers Protection Act, etc. at the moment, but it doesn't seem to be happening quick enough. Yeah.
I published a story a few months ago dealing with a whistleblower, which I hate, by the way. Whistleblowers are, you guys know what I'm talking about. They can often be tricky to deal with. And anyway, I published the story and she got fired the same day. And I felt fucking awful. Have you been in that situation where your work has caused direct harm to someone else?
Yes. So, I have to cop to my journalistic failures. And early in my career, very naively, I worked with somebody who was involved in the South African Airways. And unfortunately, because of she did decide to become a whistleblower, and she knew the risks, but she was dismissed on the basis of our information sharing agreement. So I did cost somebody their livelihood.
Do you feel safer when a story is published? Because, if you get off now, we all know who did it, right? It's those clowns.
I do. No, totally. Yeah. That's like the horse has bolted, to borrow from another horse metaphor. But so the moments before publication involve the most trepidation, undoubtedly. That's like when you're most worried. Then something can go wrong. businessman, let me not call him by the name, he can at that moment do something pretty extreme before publication. After publication would just be foolhardy.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we definitely, that's this massive cathartic effect. If you publish, the information floats into the air and is consumed by the public, and that really makes it very unviable for them to then take that sort of action. And mostly we see legal action instead of those extremes.
Yeah. Micah, how about you? Have you felt under threat?
Yeah, I've had my run-ins. I mean, the Equatorial Guinea, I was arrested. It's not a nice place to be arrested.
No.
But yeah, thankfully all was fine. I spent a day in being held by the police, but not specifically for being a journalist, because I wasn't there as a journalist, of course. It being Equatorial Guinea, I went in as a tourist. And yeah, we've had issues. A lot of legal threats, to sue us in the UK, which would have financially crippled the organization I was working for. We had the case with Zunaid Motti. I think often the danger comes from sort of lower level sources who are perhaps less politically prominent, less shrewd, and for whom there's a lot more at stake. So it's like I'm talking about sort of a small, say a bureaucrat and this is where I think your work gets very dangerous, is like, sort of mid-level crooks who have invested everything in this one act of corruption or whatever it may be, and who probably inhabit a world that is pretty violent and dangerous. You think of sort of tenders within the municipalities and that kind of thing. And I've had, doing those sorts of stories, I've felt a bit more at risk at times. There was one, sort of bureaucrat from an obscure organization who was completely unhinged and suicidal and was very threatening. But then also, I think we also have to see this in perspective, right? I echo everything you say about whistleblowers and them being sort of, in a sense, lower down on the food chain, easier targets, but we're still on the food chain. And across the world, we're seeing free speech come under attack, from Hong Kong to New Delhi to Berlin to Trump's America. And last year was the most dangerous, the most lethal year on record for journalists, driven by Israel's killing machine. Israel's policy of deliberately targeting journalists in Gaza. More than 200 journalists killed last year. It's unprecedented. So it's not a good year for journalists, I don't think. Yeah. It's not a good time for journalists. The last few years have been bad. Thankfully, in South Africa, we're relatively okay. I think when you look at things globally, he's still alive, and I think the courts have shown, the higher courts have shown that shown a real appreciation for freedom of expression. They've consistently erred on the side of they've consistently taken the side of journalists and free expression. They've shown it to be absolutely central to our democracy, and we are, at least in what we can say. I mean, we live in a very dysfunctional democracy in many ways, and we have all our problems with access to information, and we live in a violent society where whistleblowers get killed. But we can get away with saying a lot more than journalists in, say, the UK even.
Yeah,
and that we have to fight hard to protect, I think.
100%.
And that is only the situation because we very jealously guard our freedom of expression in this country, I think.
Yep. We have less than 40 seconds, so I'm just going to ask you for a sort of one-word, two-word answer to my final question, and that is, if you could ask Santa Claus for one thing for journalists for Christmas, what would it be, Estelle?
I think boundless energy, that you can just keep going, don't have to sleep.
Fair enough. Micah?
Buckets of cash.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he got that, didn't he?
I would say unlimited free therapy for the rest of your life.
We've come to the end of our time, so I'm going to Thank you very much, not just for being on the panel, obviously, but for the absolutely outstanding, exemplary work you do for all of us in this country. Thank you so much. We will see you at the drinks.